Please introduce yourself for the record and make your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Love calling you that. I'm Representative Peggy Bennett from District 23A, and I move House File 6 before the committee with the intention that the bill be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill or further action at a later date.
Madam Chair, would you proceed with your presentation?
I will, thank you very much. So House File 6 covers several of the education priorities of the House Republican Caucus for education. And throughout the bill, we make it clear that literacy is learning, that local control is innovation, and empowered parents are engaged parents. This bill is divided into 3 articles and are presented here together. And I just want to emphasize here that as the chair, I do intend to take the separate components in this bill and have them brought forward as individual legislation. I'm not a big fan of omnibus bills, but this is a great way to get our message out. So we will present it in this way. So starting with, I'm just going to give a quick overview, and I've brought some expertise here at the table with me. Article 1, we focus on our commitment to foundational literacy skills, which we heard a lot about from the testifiers. Literacy skills for reading instruction delivered through the science of reading. And Representative Mueller, who's been a leader in our caucus on literacy, reading instruction, and the science of reading, will be talking more about this in a moment. So I'll just go on. Article 2, we focus on empowering parents with information and promoting education innovation through local control and flexibility. And eventually here, Representative Bakeberg will, with his real-life experience as both a teacher and current administrator, he will be walking us through Article 2. In Article 3, we provide flexibility for school boards in both funding and relief from the more than 65 new mandates imposed on our schools in the previous biennium. And I'm going to touch on that part right now, so we're going to flip around a little bit. So we'll start with Article 3. And that one, as I mentioned, provides flexibility for funding and mandates. We have flexible funding for schools throughout fiscal year 2029, which would be the 2028-29 school year. And what this bill does, under this section, school boards would be allowed to transfer any funds that are not otherwise encumbered or limited by federal law, so long as that transfer does not inadvertently trigger additional state aid or local levy. And I heard a lot of testimony of, hey, we have this pocket of money in this pocket and we need it here, but we can't do that. And we need to provide flexibility to our schools, to their budget people and so on to be able to do that. Section 2 allows for mandate relief also through the 28-29 school year. And under this section, school boards would be allowed to delay implementation of many of the new mandates that were imposed in the 23-24 legislative biennium. And before I touch on what some of those mandates are, this is not kicking the can down the road. This is saying, hey, we need to take a pause, take a deep breath, and give districts time, and school boards, superintendents, teachers, and so on, time to implement these carefully and with fidelity, which is another word I heard. That's super important. We don't want to just haphazardly start all these things. I can't imagine all the balls our school districts are trying to juggle at the same time right now. That is impossible. We cannot do that to our teachers and our staff and those leaders in our districts. So what we would do is allow those school boards to make these choices for their districts and delay some of these for a certain time period. So the mandates included in the new requirements from these session laws, it would be the 2023 Early Childhood Omnibus, Chapter 24, the 2023 Education Omnibus, Chapter 55, the 2024 Education Policy Omnibus, Chapter 109, the 2024 Education Finance Children and Families Omnibus, Chapter 115, the paid family and medical leave mandated under 2023, Chapter 59, the earned sick and safe time mandated under 2023, Chapter 53, and also any amendments to these laws that were enacted during the 23-24 biennium. So in either case, whether it's flexible funding or mandate relief, the school board may adopt their action at a resolution during a public meeting. These will be community decisions to delay these or to implement them. That's up to the local school board, and that's what local control is. There may be some mandates that I personally think are very harmful or I don't like, but local control means empowering our local parents, administrators, school board members, teachers, and so on to make these local decisions and also respecting those local decisions. So we offer these options for funding and funding and mandate flexibility in the near term with the expectation that we as lawmakers would then think very hard after listening to testimony like we heard today about imposing any new mandates. I don't want to see any new mandates over the next 2 years, and really consider seriously revising or repealing these existing mandates according to what's needed and what makes sense and what works for our kids. So thank you, Mr. Chair. And if we have time, which I believe we do, I would ask you to recognize Representative Mueller to explain Article 1 and then Representative Bakeberg to explain Article 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate your presentation. At this point in time, we'll recognize Representative Mueller for her presentation on, I believe, Article 1, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. I'm very excited to be able to talk about, and members of the public, especially those who are here as superintendents and principals. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule. I've heard so much about all of this, and I'm very excited to be able to talk about the changes that we are looking at the READ Act. Article 1 does provide revisions to the READ Act as enacted in the 23-24 legislative biennium. We all have heard that we have a shared goal and a shared priority of literacy. No one disagrees with this shared goal. No one disagrees that the READ Act was important, necessary, monumental. However, we had bipartisan consensus that whole language and balanced literacy approach to reading instruction failed. After years of deception, the reading charlatans have been exposed and their frauds have been revealed. And we intend to keep that pressure on to make sure that this does not continue to slide backward. While the READ Act has acknowledged the real problem, as implemented, it is quite simply, and we heard this over and over from you, it is overregulated and underfunded. 100% overregulated and underfunded. I have to acknowledge some of the good faith effort and work that was put into the READ Act, but I also have to acknowledge that in the 2024 session, there were actual work that actually rolled back our goals and our what we are hoping to see with the READ Act implications. So in Article 1, simply, if you have the bill in front of you, if you look just at the very first from lines 1.25 to 2.23, we see that we have an unequivocal commitment to the science of reading and a fundamental belief that every child has the right to read, period. Nothing else. We are going to be on the science of reading, and every child has the right to read. Going on, we have heard from our school districts that the Department of Education's partnership with the Center for Applied Research and Educational Improvement, also known as CARE, has been very limiting to schools. It has caused some barriers and has taken away funding from our schools, to actually implement this with fidelity. This process has been made worse by new misdirected political goals embedded into the law that distract our focus from foundational literacy skills. So because of that, if you, it will show later on, I guess I didn't mark the on my bill, that the bill ends the partnership with Cary and directs MDE to take up their primary role in assisting schools. This partnership, by directed in this bill, will end this June. We also repeal some of the new requirements included by the 2024 session that have political or ideological purposes, which distracts from the core mission of education. You find that on 5.11 through 13. And then in 9.21 through 9.23, we restore the expectation that teachers, they need to, while they are currently not being properly prepared, and that is a discussion that we need to be talking about with OHE and teacher prep schools and looking at upstream instruction so that we can have our teachers properly prepared. We have the expectation that teachers are not only properly prepared to provide reading instruction, but they also will reinstate an assessment to verify this. And that's on 9.21 and 9.23. Let me just be blunt. Literacy is learning. This isn't a partisan issue. And when kids can't read, I'm going to repeat the line, it's happening. When kids can't read, every book is banned. And we cannot allow our students to be denied a core function of literacy, which is allowing them to function in our society. When we provide a child with the foundational literacy skills, we empower children to become lifelong learners. And so that is why this is Article 1 and is one of our top priorities when we look at our educational leadership. So, Mr. Chair, I'm done with my testimony and would ask that you would now honor Representative Bakeberg with Article 2.
Thank you, Representative Mueller. At this point in time, Representative Bakeberg, you have 3 minutes now. Representative Bakeberg, would you give your presentation of Article 2?
He's never only spoken 3 minutes in his life.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try to be brief. That's not one of my gifts. I'll just own that right now. But before I jump into Article 2, I just want to thank all the educators in the room. And I think it was a unique perspective shared. It wasn't just Metro. It wasn't just outstate. We had educators, administrators, teachers from across Minnesota sharing a perspective. And frankly, it's not a new perspective because this has been shared over and over again over the last couple years. So thank you. Continue to make your voices heard. And I would challenge all of us as legislators to actually listen and implement what these people are saying, because they are the actual boots on the ground that have to implement what happens at these tables. So with that, Article 2 is amply applied educational innovation because it focuses primarily on empowering schools to be innovative. That's it. So this is accomplished by identifying and revising current statutes that are already in place, but they come with the caveat that districts need to seek permission from the Commissioner of Education, and we are changing that. So these revisions shift the mindset from schools of merely seeking permission from the state to a mindset of trusting our local school officials, our school boards, our educators, and our parents. When these three groups are at the table making decisions at the local level, doing what's best for their local community without the heavy hand of bureaucracy, amazing things can happen. And I bet if we had these testifiers come back up and share what they're doing at their local districts, we would get powerful things that are happening in Farmington, in Chatfield, in Fergus Falls, in Prior Lake, Minnetonka. I look forward to those conversations. But Article 2 is broken down into 3 categories or 3 areas. First, it directs the Department of Education to create a performance report that is user-friendly in common sense language so that educators, parents, taxpayers, normal constituents can actually read and understand. There's a lot of this information already online, but it's putting it in a way that is easily accessible for parents, for educators, for everyone to navigate. We want parents and educators to have easy access to the critical metrics of school performance: reading, math, science, social studies, college and career readiness, to name a few. The foundational aspects of what is important to school. We heard Superintendent Law talk about how we have all of these things that schools are expected to do. When I did my master's program about 20 years ago, one of the slides at Minnesota State Mankato was about all of the items that schools were expected to do. And it went back to 1950s. And then it was in the 1990s. And from the 1950s to the 1990s, it had grown exponentially. And that was 20 years ago. Think about what the expectations are on schools, and we wonder why educators are struggling. To be clear, this is not a report card. We're not grading schools. We want to give information to educators, to parents, to be able to make their own determinations, because when we empower parents, when we empower educators, they will be engaged with us. And as an educator, I want parents to engage in the process, because when that happens, guess what happens? Kids succeed. And that's what we hear that's what we heard today, that everyone is about kids. Secondly, this bill identifies a variety of statutory and session law programs like experiential and applied learning opportunities for students, or innovation zones, which are wonderful, and put the planning and decision-making in the hands of the educators, not the commissioner, not the Department of Education. We also identify several current innovative programs buried inside of 124D and move all of these programs into a new chapter known as educational innovation. And the purpose of that is to empower educators to be able to point to those statutes about why they have the statutory authority to do the work that they want to do. Simply put, it's providing clarity to educators so that the superintendents, the boards, the teachers can say, this is why we're doing it. Third, we convert the current Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Center within the Department of Education to get back to the mission of what schools are all about. So we create a new office called the Office of Achievement and Innovation. Very simply, the direct mission of this is for school districts and charter schools, is for the department to help school districts in researching and implementing practices focused on promoting academic achievement in those core areas: reading, math, science, social, college and career readiness, to name a few. The mission comes with one key limitation, and this is important to understand. All opinions and guidance issued by the office or by the department are advisory in nature and are not binding to the locally elected school district or charter school. The decision is made at the local level. This new Office of Achievement and Innovation will serve as a clearinghouse for nonprofits. Far too long, the members of this committee and Education Finance we have heard from nonprofit group after nonprofit group, and we have handpicked which nonprofit groups receive funding and who schools will work with. We shift that dynamic to empower local school districts to determine which nonprofit might be helpful, and have the department conduct its due diligence to avoid shady nonprofits from taking advantage of local school districts. Simply put, this entire House File 6 is about empowering educators at the local level to meet their needs. So with that, Mr. Chair, that is Article 2, and it is, I'll turn it back over to Chair Bennett.
Thank you, Representative Bakeberg. I suspect you had more you wanted to share. But at this point in time, I want to thank Representative Bakeberg, Representative Mueller, Chair Bennett. Thank you for your presentation on your bill today. The chair lays over House File 6 for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill to be further considered at a later date.